So today I'm talking to Dr.Raja Selvam, and I have been participating in a module and a course in ISP. And Raja, now I've worked with you for 12 days, and I must say that I'm very impressed of your work and the teachings you're offering. And if you like, you can maybe introduce yourself. Just talk a little bit about your background and where you're coming from and where you work. Yeah?
I grew up in India.
Yeah?
And I moved to the United States when I was 26 years old. That was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And I found myself eventually becoming a clinical psychologist in the state of California.
Yeah.
And my work has always been oriented toward how to bring the body into psychology. As you know, the body has been neglected, in mainstream psychology for a long time. There's more interest now, and my interest has been how to make better use of it.
How to make better use of the body in psychology.
Yeah. Especially for this purpose. I've always known that healing does not happen without facing necessary suffering. But not all suffering necessarily leads to healing.
No.
And I've been wanting to find ways to minimizing the suffering and making the healing possibility greater when people do suffer in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And what it has led to is the ancient wisdom from the East as well as the West, that when we make use of the body container, our suffering is a lot less, and the healing is a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's what ISP, the Integral Somatic Psychology training, is all about.
Yeah, and you're saying East and West.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you saw some limitations in the way we work with psychology and the outcomes in normal psychology, or what is being taught in universities and all these, because during these days I can see you have knowledge about almost all types of body work and theories and everything. And then you say the Eastern, you just brought that in.
Yeah.
You just say that the Eastern philosophy of Vedanta, today we learned a lot, and you could really see how you integrate that knowledge, and also it's a kind of a base or an understanding. Could you just explore it a little bit with me, or just tell a little bit about how you bring the Eastern philosophy into psychology work and body work?
Vedanta is a spiritual approach from India.
Yeah.
And where the goal of enlightenment is sought by those who are on the path. Now, what is emphasized as a very basic requirement, qualification for people to be on the path of enlightenment, to come to know that they're everything that there is the ability to tolerate opposites.
Mm-hmm.
Joy and happiness, joy and sadness, also emptiness and fullness, hope and hopelessness, integrity and fragmentation. All these experiences that life necessarily meets us with, whether we are high or low in terms of social standing.
Basic human experiences and emotions.
It's up and down. It's when we develop a capacity to tolerate these opposites that we become better boats to navigate the ocean of life without being toppled by every storm or turbulence that comes our way. The Buddhists call it equanimity. Life is full of turbulence, but how do we handle ourselves as these turbulences create unbearable states in a body, whether they're good or bad? And there is a possibility to use the body, the physical body. This is the body we're given in this life, for whatever reason. And therefore, it is the container in which we have to create this capacity. Not by going away from it, dissociating from it, but by being in it and tolerating these limitations and the good, the joys and the pains of life. And the more we can use this body, without shutting it down, the more the capacity we have, the more we meet the basic qualification for being on a spiritual path. It's not unique to Vedanta. Jungian psychology also requires for the ego to establish a productive relationship with the self, that it has an ability to tolerate opposites. So what we are trying to do in the integral somatic psychology approach is how to actually implement it in therapy, in a simple way. Not only implement it in therapy, but also educate clients who are going through the process so that they have for the rest of their lives the tool to use their own body to make to navigate life, its ups and downs, with integrity, but also with increasing capacity for future challenges.
Yeah, and creating meaning.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
It turns out that the more we can embody affect, the more and relevant meaning we can create. Our experience in the world is in interaction with the environment, right? It involves the whole organism. The psychologist from the University of Chicago, Eugene Gendlin, who developed focusing therapy, talks about it a lot more eloquently than I can. That it's in interacting with the environment, the whole organism gathers knowledge and experience. And what the brain then does is to really make these things more explicit as thoughts and feelings and sensations. And what is at the base of that, when we interact with the environment, it's not thought that we're interacting with. We're interacting with an experience in the body. It's a meaningful experience, and that is what psychologists call affect. It doesn't have to be joy and sadness. It can be fullness and emptiness, satisfaction and dissatisfaction, or a vague sense of unease in being in this environment. They're all affect states. And if you can really create an embodiment for these states, then the meanings we make are going to be more relevant. And what we think we have to do about it and what we do about it are likely to be more relevant.
Yeah. You can see the Eastern philosophies and the tradition there is, it's difficult to implement in the Western life, that you go into a mountain and meditate and you have a teacher and mostly meeting the internal life and doing practices. And us in the West, or just in the whole world, we are interacting constantly, we are experiencing trauma, and it's like we try all kinds of things to be more in harmony and to solve our psychological problems. And this is the first approach or practical work I have done where I could see that you actually are connecting East and West, the brain, the body, and also the spiritual aspects of, because your whole, as we learned today, we were talking about Atman and Brahman and the whole foundation of Vedanta and Advaita, and but for many people, they are not interested or haven't been working with spiritual life. It seems there's no conflict here. Working with your tools, it's like we're inviting in a presence, an experienced presence when we actually do the work and the training.
It is, you can look at it in different ways. And first of all, this is the time where many people are trying to do such integration, and I'm really glad to be a part of that. And a way to look at it is as follows. Jung talks about the capacity to tolerate opposites being a very important part of the healing process. And when that happens, or in any time when two people come together and work, there is always a third present. So when two people come together to create a capacity for opposites in the client, then the third becomes more significantly involved. You know, that this actually moving in the direction of spirituality without even ever naming it as such. Now, all these practices, meditation for long periods of time, are important parts of, you know, spiritual path. And in fact, there comes a time in life when people are more interested in that, and that's okay. What we do in the integral somatic psychology approach is to take ordinary scenarios that people come to us with, ordinary problems people come to us with, and use them like alchemists to create a capacity for opposites in these situations, to give them relief from their symptoms, to make them more resilient when they run into these problems in the future, so they don't become symptomatic or they bounce back from difficulty quickly. But at the same time, create something more, some capacity in them that somehow meets the criteria alchemy, Jungian psychology, and Advaita Vedanta require for spiritual evolution.
Sometimes the brain can really play tricks on us when we do trauma work and all these thoughts, and the direct experience of something resolving or something, there's room for another presence, another stillness and neutrality, so you react less. It's a very felt work that you do.
It is.
You cannot cheat anybody, you cannot talk your way into it. You really have to do the work.
You have to, it's like preparing the temple, creating capacity for opposites in the body. I can give you an example too. For example, somebody was afraid of dying, and she had had a trauma in which she nearly died. And she was incubated, she was prematurely born, and so she was hanging on to life. And that early experience really informed her, shaped her. And therefore contact became difficult, because it would, as soon as she became more contactful, it would bring up the fear. Yeah. So we worked with that. Yeah, we worked with that. So that's like working with that fear of dying in the body, you know, making sure you know, the container is expanded so that it's easier to be with that feeling. Yeah. Then it resulted in a container that when it was empty of the fear, filled up with deeper energies of a being. Yeah. You know, she said at some point that I'm really here for the first time. Yeah. Yeah. And that is possible. It's almost like incarnation work. You know, somebody from trauma is half incarnate and coping with life from that perspective. And we help them to go through that in an intelligent way, not scream their way out or dissociate their way out, or look for it in one place in the body where it's very difficult. Any energy that's concentrated in one place in the body is necessarily more difficult than when it's actually expanded into the rest of the body. Then when that happens, the other levels of the being do not have to be hesitant to come into a being for fear of activating the fear of dying. And that's exactly what she experienced. And that is what beautiful to see.
Yeah. So how did you come up with this practice, and what happened?
Well, I was in a different track altogether. I was in a business, then I was in business education. I have degrees in statistics and economics and business, all the way to the doctoral level. At some point in time, I just felt that I was not fulfilled. And it led me to therapy. And in the therapy, I discovered that there were so many unfinished issues in myself. And heartbreaks and losses. And as I worked with them, I was fortunate enough to find different modalities like Jungian psychology, Reichian therapy, Neo-Reichian, bioenergetics therapy, biodynamic analysis, somatic experiencing, craniosacral therapy, a lot of different systems, while I was also working, I also was equally drawn to analytical psychology of Jung and object relations therapy and so on. So, I like to learn. And I like to experiment with things that I learned personally.
Yeah.
And as I went through these things, and then of course I started to teach. I never thought I would teach psychology, but once I started to do it, and it was so much fun that I thought that I had found my life's mission. But now I know that my life's mission is about teaching about embodiment.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot through my personal experimentation and experimentation with clients. Studied the science of the physiology of emotions and other psychological experiences that are there in research journals for over 100 years that have not been quite integrated into the psychological realm of mainstream psychology because the body is not being attended to. Studied affect theory, realized that most of the time the affect emotions we have are not emotions we recognize as emotions, like emptiness and fullness and satisfaction and dissatisfaction, not happiness and sadness. Those things come like flowers in season, but not as often as these more basic affects. So bringing that in, because psychology had not brought it in because it was not paying attention to the body. So all these things and learning body work systems, how to regulate the body, how to expand the body, so that when we're working with psychological experience, we don't over-regulate it away.
Yeah.
But to keep them alive while we regulate them so that the affect emotion is supported but not in a regulated way, while at the same time making sure the body doesn't get too sick or too symptomatic. So this has been an ongoing process. My life purpose, I think, is embodiment, and it's not done. It's also personal. It's a personal quest too. I've experienced many traumas in my life, including a birth trauma in which I nearly died, that made embodiment difficult. So, there's a person once said, we teach what we learn. Learn. And one therapist said, we treat what we need to treat in ourselves. No, I really see that. So it's an ongoing engagement of using embodiment to help others. No, it doesn't matter what therapy they're practicing, or whether they're practicing psychological work or spiritual work. There is a place that they're always working with difficult experiences such as emotions. How does one embody them, and through embodiment, resolve them faster than when you don't embody them? That's a thing like.
There's so many therapies where we very fast either we make a conclusion or we regulate the body. And your approach, as you say, it can be used for all kinds of therapy. It's actually, as you said, if you feel, where do you feel sad? And maybe you feel it around the heart. Eventually, this area, both physically and will be put a strain on it, or overwhelming. And
if it's focused then, which is what people tend to do, because the rest of the body is defending against it.
So your approach is actually expanding, and it can be very difficult emotions from various, as we have seen these days, so many different traumas and experiences and emotions, feelings. We expand it into the body, and by that, instead of one person carrying it, only the heart, then the whole body.
Exactly.
And you have developed a strategy or some a special way of working with it